Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly massive, real-world challenge. We're looking at how we can safely integrate artificial intelligence into highly regulated physical spaces. And listen, we're talking about environments where making a mistake isn't just, inconvenient, it's legally actionable. So let's dive right in and build a step-by-step framework for making AI genuinely trustworthy out there in the physical world.
So I want you to imagine something for a second. How on earth do you safely recycle an entire skyscraper? It's just a staggering logistical problem. You can't just take a wrecking ball to a building and toss all that rubble into a landfill anymore. Taking it apart piece by piece requires flawless safety checks, deep structural knowledge, and absolute regulatory compliance. Now, naturally, we want AI to help speed this process up. But think about it. If an AI guesses wrong about a load-bearing beam or some hazardous material, disastrous, literally a catastrophe.
Well, this brings us to a concept called urban mining. Simply put, it's the systematic recovery of materials from existing buildings. And the absolute heart of this whole process is something called the pre-demolition assessment, or PDA. This is a highly regulated, formal, legal audit. If we're going to use AI to categorize these building parts, it absolutely has to serve the qualified human auditors. Because at the end of the day, those humans are the ones legally on the hook. The AI cannot just be some mysterious black box, it has to be a fully accountable assistant.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. First up, we'll look at the defensibility problem. Second, we'll explore a core analogy, the detective versus the rulebook. Third, we'll break down the 4 modes of integration. Fourth, we'll walk through a real-world fire door example. And finally, we'll wrap up with the real-world impact.
Okay, let's jump into part 1, the AI defensibility problem, or why just being accurate isn't nearly enough for regulators.
So here's the thing. In a high-stakes legal audit, being right 99% of the time means absolutely nothing if you can't explain why you're right. An AI actually has to be what we call defensible, and that requires 4 very strict properties. First is legibility. It needs to explain itself using official regulatory vocabulary. Second is plausibility. It has to obey the literal laws of physics. Third is sourcing. We have to know exactly where its uncertainty is coming from. And fourth, contestability. A human auditor must be able to challenge the AI's claim and to leave a permanent record of that challenge. Now, standard AI models, they simply cannot do all of this on their own. No way.
Moving right along to part 2, the detective versus the strict rulebook. Let's look at why we actually have to combine 2 completely different technologies to pull this off.
To get those 4 legal properties we just talked about, we have to bridge 2 totally different worlds. On the left side, we have explainable AI, or XAI. Think of this as your intuitive detective. It looks at raw data, like a bunch of pixels, and says, hey, I'm 91% sure this is a door. But the detective doesn't know the building codes. On the right side, we have knowledge graphs, or KGs. This is your strict rulebook. It contains all the laws of physics and the building regulations, but the rulebook is blind. It can't actually see the door sitting right in front of you. The real breakthrough here is linking these 2 together. Which brings us perfectly to part 3, the 4 modes of integration. We're going to go through a step-by-step methodology for actually building defensible AI.
All right, mode 1 is called lifting. Here's how it flows. The input, our AI detective highlights some important features, like maybe a cluster of pixels and an image. The process, the knowledge graph rulebook steps in and translates those raw pixels into an actual physical object, like a door hinge. The output is this clear, legible graph that uses official, standard terminology. This absolutely nails our first requirement, legibility. The human auditor isn't looking at raw math or code. They are looking at real structural building terms they understand.
Next up is mode 2, which is constraining. Say we want to figure out how to increase a material's recycling value. The AI proposes an alternative scenario. But an AI left to its own devices might suggest something completely physically impossible. Like, I don't know, replacing a concrete load-bearing pillar with thin glass, which obviously would not end well. So, in the process phase, our rulebook actively filters out anything that violates physical axioms. The output is a list of only physically sound interventions. This guarantees our second property, plausibility. The auditor never even has to waste time looking at impossible suggestions.
Okay, mode 3 is typing. Here the AI input gives us a raw confidence score. It might say, I am 91% confident this is a steel beam, but frankly, a raw percentage is completely meaningless in a court of law or a legal audit. The process here uses the knowledge graph to map that 91% into a specific, legally structured reliability tier, like tagging it formally as assumed evidence. The output provides these nicely differentiated, sourced assertions. And boom, that locks in our third property, sourcing. The auditor knows the exact legal weight and origin of the AI's claim.
Finally, we have mode 4, revising. Honestly, this is probably the most crucial step for keeping the human firmly in control. The input is the human auditor looking at the AI's legally mapped claim and actively deciding to either contest it or accept it. The process relies on the knowledge graph to securely update the specific history of that item. And the output? An inspectable, queryable revision track. It records exactly who changed the decision, exactly when, and exactly why. This definitively fulfills our final legal property, contestability.
So stepping back and looking at this whole structure, you can see how it perfectly maps out. Every single mode, lifting, constraining, typing, and revising, takes a raw XCI input, passes it right through that knowledge graph substrate, and permanently unlocks one of the core legal properties required for defensibility. Without that knowledge graph, the AI's outputs are just floating, legally useless numbers.
Let's make this concrete. Part 4, the fire door audit example. Let's see what happens when we put this theory to the test in the real world.
Let's trace our 4 modes happening in real time during a typical building audit. At time 1, lifting translates some pixel heat maps to tell the auditor it sees a fire door. At time 2, the auditor asks how to raise the door's reuse value. Constraining ensures the AI only suggests physically sound upgrades, like swapping glued hinges for bolted hinges. At time 3, typing tags the AI's initial guess as assumed, which prompts the human to go physically inspect the door. And hey, it's a really good thing they do, because it turns out the AI was actually wrong. It's just a smoke seal, not a fire-rated seal. Finally, at time 4, revising kicks in. The auditor legally downgrades the item to a smoke-controlled door, creating a perfect, time-stamped provenance trail for the regulators.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, Why This Framework Matters. We're looking at the future of AI and accountability-bearing processes.
The researchers who put this together hit the nail on the head with this quote. They wrote, "Explanations fail not because techniques are inadequate, but because they are deployed without a substrate that unlocks the properties defensibility requires." What does that mean in plain English? Basically, if you drop an AI into a high-stakes environment without a structural rulebook backing it up, its explanations are practically useless. It can't defend itself legally. It absolutely needs that knowledge graph substrate to anchor its guesses to reality. The practical impacts of this framework are just massive. By combining these systems, using those 4 modes, organizations can actually ensure compliance with strict new laws, like the EU AI Act. It meets highly specific sector standards for building and recycling, and it provides documented, legally sound reasons for every single automated suggestion. But most importantly, it keeps humans, qualified, accountable humans, in authoritative control. The AI is doing the heavy algorithmic lifting, sure, but the human remains the definitive auditor.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. As AI inevitably enters more high-stakes physical domains, whether that's urban mining or healthcare or transportation, how will we ensure the human rulebook always oversees the algorithmic detective? This paper gives us a really powerful blueprint for making sure our technology serves us safely and accountably. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember to keep asking the tough questions about the tools we're building.